The All-Whitehouse Beach Club, and no dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, who's on the other side of the camera. But we have two guests today, and they've been here before. And we have Brian Chisholm, who's a member of the Maryland House of Delegates, and Delegate Matt Morgan, also a member of the Maryland House of Delegates. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us. Great to be back.
And we had a great time. I just want to say last week, this podcast is called All-Whitehouse Beach Club. Why is it called the All-Whitehouse Beach Club? Because Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island belongs to a beach club in the state of Rhode Island that has only white members. Now, in normal times, you should be able to belong to any club that you want to. Allegedly, this club, I just want to say, is not a club that is just an all-white only. Obviously, it's not segregated, but for whatever reason, they don't have a single black member, which does make you wonder, right? How is it that Sheldon Whitehouse is Mr. BLM supporter, but doesn't have any kind of black members in this particular club? So here's who Sheldon Whitehouse is, podcast listeners. It says he was born in 1955, an American lawyer and politician serving as the junior United States Senator from Rhode Island since 2007. He's a member of the Democrat Party. Here's what I find this really interesting. Early life and education. Whitehouse was born in 55, New York City, and he's the son of a career diplomat, Charles Sheldon Whitehouse, and grandson of diplomat Edwin Sheldon Whitehouse. So obviously this guy is from, the elite in the United States of America, because how else would he get elected from Rhode Island, especially if you've ever heard him talk, because he sounds incredibly stupid when you hear him speak. But in the Western Journal, there's this article that broke. It said, pro-BLM Democrat senator's hypocrisy gets exposed when he's confronted about his membership in an all-white beach club. And it says, the Rhode Island Democrat is more than willing to mouth off on climate change and BLM, and he's not afraid to threaten members of the United States Supreme Court. He's got no problem preening about racial injustice and hashtag Black Lives Matter on Twitter. But when questioned about his own membership in an all-exclusive, all-white beach club in his home state, he doesn't have a response. So we have a clip on this where a reporter approaches Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and says, Senator, what about this all-white beach club? Is that really true? Is that a thing? And we had that clip, and here it is.
Okay, back in 2017, you had expressed concerns about the membership of the all-white Bailey's Beach Club, said that you hoped it would become more diverse. Now, your family's been members, your wife is one of the largest shareholders. Has there been any traction in that? Are there any minority members of the club now?
I think the people who are running the place are still working on that, and I'm sorry it hasn't happened yet.
Do you have concerns in 2021? I mean, obviously it's been 4 years. You had remarks on the floor following the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd saying, hoping to root out systemic racism in the country. Your thoughts on an elite, all-white, wealthy club, again, in this day and age? Should these clubs continue to exist?
It's a long tradition in Rhode Island, and there are many of them. I think we just need to work our way through the issues. Thank you.
The car's here.
He just said there's a long tradition, of all white beach clubs in Rhode Island, and we're doing our best. I'm not really sure how they're going to elect or get more people who are of color in this beach club. Look, if you've ever been to Newport, Rhode Island is probably one of the richest and whitest zip codes in America and incredibly exclusive. But isn't it funny that here you have this elitist Democrat who's a United States Senator, Brian, and his father and grandfather were diplomats, and all he talks about is how he's pro-BLM and there's systemic racism, all of the talking points, but he doesn't live the way he talks.
I think he was confused. I think he believes that BLM was beach-loving members. And whoever's running the club, maybe we need to change the recruitment chairman. If we just, we've been walking around for a year. We can't find anybody that's not white to join the club. What a horrible excuse. It's our tradition to just be all white. Maybe we'll find a black person or a minority that wants to join us one day. But until that day, I don't know what to do. We're just going to remain white.
Exactly. In Providence, Rhode Island, there are plenty of black communities there. So why can't they try to get people to join the all-white beach club in Newport, Rhode Island. And once again, I've been to Newport only because of the fact that my brother was in the Naval Academy Preparatory School, which is located in Newport, which is where you go, by the way, in order to get into the Naval Academy. If you don't get into the Naval Academy at your first try, you go to the prep school and you spend a year there, then you get into the academy. And I remember going there saying to myself, I've never seen so much wealth in my life, because that's where the Vanderbilts went on vacation during the summers, because there wasn't air conditioning at the time. There was no such thing as air conditioning. So you would build houses in places like Newport where the ocean was cold. And so I'm giving you this background information, Matt, because this is a United States Senator whose family is Northeast liberals and elitists. And it's like, well, we want to live amongst our own, but everybody else, you're the systemic racist.
Right. You're the systemic racist, but apparently they've been trying to work on this since 2017 and haven't made any progress. So it's just like any other Democratic policy that he would support. It hasn't worked out at all. I do find it interesting that they're always proposing like it's the conservatives out in the rural areas. I can tell you in the area that I've represented here in rural area of Maryland, I think white-only clubs went out sometime in the 1950s.
Yep.
I didn't know anything like this existed. And maybe this is why they're so self-flatulating here, beating themselves with, because they're the creators of most of the systemic racism
Well, I think
problems.
they're self-flagellating, not self-flatulating.
Yeah,
so.
well, I mean, it's something smelly.
So what I think's funny is his last name's Whitehouse.
Yeah.
Right? He's a United States Senator and his last name's Whitehouse and he belongs to an all-white beach club. Kind of funny, right? That his name. And look, I remember going to the shore in Anne Arundel County, not far from where you represent.
Correct.
And I was a kid, and there was this big billboard, and it was put in by the community because it was a beach community where everybody had these little beach shacks. They weren't like fancy beach homes. They were beach shacks. And on the billboard, it said, "Here are the residents only, Gentiles only." I remember asking my father, I think I was like 7 years old, like, "Dad, what's a Gentile?" And he's like, "Shut up. You can't talk about this." Well, it's because I wasn't a Gentile. I was Catholic. My father was Protestant. My mother was Catholic. Which was a big no-no to get married that way in the 50s. So there were beach clubs that only allowed Protestants, beach clubs that only allowed Jews, beach clubs that excluded Jews, excluded, and so forth, right? But here's the thing. If you know the Northeast, because I married a Northeasterner, there's no place in the United States more segregated today in the 21st century than the Northeast. I mean, there is no integration in those communities, and yet it's all liberals, progressives that represent them.
He reminds me of the Thurston Howell of the senators. Nowadays, if you look back at Thurston Howell and Gilligan's Island, he was like all uppity, better than everybody else. And if you notice, there was no black people in that club either. I guess they didn't make the SS
Thurston
minimum.
Howell the third,
The
right?
third, that's exactly right.
But it's like Sheldon Whitehouse the third. He's not a third, but he has like different names of his ancestors because that's how far they go back. But when you see this guy, he almost looks like a comic because you can tell that every time he talks, it's just stuff that he memorized. He's not particularly bright.
He sounds like a U.S. senator.
Yeah.
He sounds certainly from the Northeast, but he doesn't. How can you belong to a beach club and you show up and you see it's lily white, and then you spend your entire week in Washington talking about how Republicans are racist, and then you vote for the Juneteenth holiday as a federal holiday, and you talk about how cool you are and how woke you are, and then you go back to one of the whitest places in America, which is Newport.
Do as I say, not as I do.
I mean,
they're
constantly.
hypocrites.
It's and this is what's so funny is the Democrat Party is the party of slavery, but as I said, in the Northeast, the Democrat Party is the party still of segregation, because if you go to Long Island,
Boston,
you will see. If you go to New York City, right, one of the most liberal places on planet Earth, it's segregated. You don't have integration. I mean, you have communities that are Black communities, you have communities that are Hispanic communities, you have communities that are white communities. There isn't true integration, and there certainly isn't in Rhode Island either.
But it's okay because the senator said it was okay because they have a long tradition of it. So they've been a racist for a really long time, and that makes it okay.
Of course.
They definitely need some diversity of thought up there. And, it's just hard to imagine that places like this exist, and and apparently marketed by a U.S. senator.
Here's the thing. So when you do talk to people that are black and you do talk to them in their communities, certainly if I lived in Rhode Island, would you vote, and you're black, would you vote for this guy now that you know this, where he's saying all these things to you when he comes to your community and then he goes back? Look, podcast listeners, you have a right to live where you want. You have a right to belong to the clubs that you want to belong to. But it's just kind of odd, isn't it, in the 21st century that you don't even have a single member of color in your beach club.
Imagine if Marco Rubio or Senator Cruz had the same situation going on, what the media would be doing.
Or one of the Trump family.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Any one of them.
Oh, my gosh, it'd be all over.
Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley. I mean, they would be going crazy right now.
But that answers your question, Mark. I don't think that the average voter hears about any of this because it's not reported on, except for maybe on your podcast or other places where we know to look for news. If you're watching the nightly news or the mainstream media, they're never going to tell you that this senator belongs to an all-white beach club, whatever that happens to be.
Exactly.
So they're never going to lose the vote.
That's right. So get this, podcast listeners. The first Olympic transgender is going to be in what sport? Just guess, podcast listeners. What sport do you think the first transgender would be? By that, I mean a man who is identifying as a woman or considers himself a woman. He's a biological man, no doubt. And he is going to actually compete in the Olympics. He's from New Zealand. What sport do you think it's going to compete in? It's going to be weightlifting. He's a weightlifter. She's a weightlifter. And here's the story. So, and why is this a story? Well, because we have men competing with men in the Olympics and women competing with women in the Olympics. But now, apparently, there isn't an individual category of transgenders competing with transgenders, which seems to me that would be a lot more reasonable than it would be to have a transgender competing competing with a woman. It's kind of hard to even talk about it because it's just so damn confusing. So this New Zealand weightlifter is going to become the first transgender athlete at the Olympic Games. And here's CNN reporting New Zealand weightlifter Laurel Hubbard is her name, is set to become the first transgender athlete to compete in the Olympic Games as she was selected for the national team on Monday. She will compete in the women's 87-kilogram category, according to a statement released by the New Zealand Olympic Committee that also announced the 4 other members of the weightlifting team. Hubbard is 43 years old. Qualified, that's pretty old. Qualified to be in the Olympics, Qualified for the rescheduled Tokyo Games in May after a rule change, you think, which effectively guaranteed her a spot in the super heavyweight category, Reuters reported at the time. This will be her first time at the Olympic Games, a remarkable comeback after a significant injury in 2018. So, podcast listeners, we have a 9-second clip. It's only 9 seconds. It's 9 seconds. It's really short. And this is Laurel Hubbard picking up a bunch of weight. I'm not really sure how much weight is there. It looks like a lot, right? So this is a guy, a biological man, demonstrating her ability to lift weights, and picks up the weights and does that. What is it called when you lift them up real fast and you push them up? There's a term for that.
Clean and jerk.
It's a clean and jerk.
Clean and jerk. Okay. So they clean and jerk and push up the weights in the air to demonstrate that you can lift them. And yet, how long do they have to be in the air before is it like?
I think you just have to lock out your elbows.
I think the judge has to clear you.
Okay, because these two guys are like big with weightlifting, and these two delegates are. So here's the thing: when Laurel Hubbard lifts the weights, it's like, oh! I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, this is a biological man, obviously, but when you hear her talk or grunt, you kind of know it's proof. We had that clip, and here it is. Nice. New Zealand, right? It's like nice. It's like, okay, go ahead.
Well, it seems like she really mastered the jerk part.
Yeah.
We should be thankful this is in weightlifting and not like...
She has lots of practice at jerking, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We should be thankful this is happening in weightlifting and not like women's beach volleyball, because those uniforms leave not much for the imagination. And
didn't take long before we went right off the road there.
You're right. Well, you're right, because Laura Hubbard is wearing spandex and it's black. Her spandex is black. Laura Hubbard is white from New Zealand. And it does naturally, it's only human nature, let's face it, that when you see someone like they do the pull and jerk thing and they push the weights up, that you're looking, right? It's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
I mean,
The plumbing is right there for everybody to see. You know, it's not in a cupboard. It's we see the plumbing, and that's the thing that I thought about with this is, if we all remember, Barry Bonds, and then when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were chasing the home run record, everybody was saying it. These guys are on steroids. I mean, Barry Bonds' forehead, as great of a hitter as he was, looked like a drive-in movie theater screen. I mean, it was getting huge. And the reason why the Olympics, Major League Baseball, NFL all ban performance-enhancing drugs is it is changing your biological makeup, and it's giving you an advantage. And this, whatever pronoun you want to use for this lifter, was a male from 18 to 35 when he, she,
Yes.
whatever, was really training as a male. And you have all that testosterone running through your body. So now this male or female has a huge biological advantage of every other female. And I've already seen a couple female weightlifters come out and say, this is not fair. We are not anti-transgender, but this is not fair to basically put a male into the same category as us. And some of these weightlifters, I mean, we laugh about the clean and jerk, and it's easy to make fun of, but people train their whole life to make it into the Olympics. You can't make it into a professional weightlifting and make money.
Not.
Everybody's trying to make the Olympics. And then all of a sudden they're going to change this pronoun of this male and say, nah, she's a female. There's just absolute biological facts that we all have to recognize. Males are different than females. It's not just the obvious plumbing we're looking at, but your biological makeup inside allows you to become bigger, stronger, faster as a male. Fair or unfair, that's just the case. And it's totally unfair to put this pronoun into Olympic lifting against a female who has basically sacrificed their life for a gold medal.
for a gold medal, right?
my question is, where is the feminists in this argument here? I thought they, the people on Democrats on the left, I thought they were the protectors of women. And here, this is, you have 10,000 years of data looking at them in the face, and they're willing to not side. We were talking earlier. You remember Florence Griffin Joyner from back in the
Flojo.
Flojo.
Flojo, yeah.
Yeah,
Great athlete.
Back in 1988, she set the women's 100-meter track record at a 10.49. And that record stood for 33 years. There hasn't been a woman that come close to that record. Well, last year, the full track season, 2019, there were 76 high school boys that ran faster in that track.
That's right.
Unbelievable.
So, I mean, to sit there and look at the data, men and women are different. And this is the reason why their sports categories have always been separated. And this is like, I remember we had a amendment that we tried to push through in the General Assembly just to study this issue. And Democrats voted against it. Like, they don't even want to take a look at this.
Because there's no longer science in America in the Democrat Party.
Well, they're flat earthers.
They do not believe in science. They didn't believe in science during COVID, in terms of the pre-treatment once you got COVID, and in terms of pre-treating it before you were rushed to the hospital. God forbid you even talk about it now, because YouTube will take you off of the air. And they don't want to talk about science when it comes to transgenders, because it's like, okay, so it's one thing to argue over the fact that you should be able to, in a free society, identify however you want to, because it's your life. And if that's what you want to do, okay, fine. It's an entirely different thing to say, well, I was biologically born a guy, and now I want to go forth and compete against women because I know that I can, and I can probably do a better job. I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, how stupid are we as a society to think that this guy from New Zealand isn't gaming the system? Of course he's gaming the system.
Exactly. Most mathematicians will tell you, and this is science and math, you just can't refute this, that all human life, you're a 1 in 700 trillion chance. And that's between your dad's swimmers and your mom's special pool, let's call it. If you're mad about the way you were born, You had 6,999,999 other chances. You are what you are. You can't change that.
Yes.
You have to. I understand you might feel a different way, and feelings are fine, and you might want to identify as something else, but that does not change your biological makeup, and you can't then impose this on the Olympics or any other sport and say,
and the Olympics are going woke, right? The Olympics are going woke. And by the way, when the Olympics go woke, Matt, you know what that means? It means that people aren't going to care to watch it anymore. And they're not going to care to watch it anymore because the results aren't real.
Well, the results aren't real.
They're not reliable.
Look at it as from an athletic standpoint. This guy is 43 years old. He's way past his prime performance.
Yes.
And he's going to dominate in a sport because, well, he's competing against women. It's just not right. And you see this happening from Little League up to through high school and in NCAA. And I really applaud the states that had the courage to go ahead and ban this and protect our female athletes because it's simply just not fair.
What's that locker room like? You know, you go afterwards. All right, everybody shower. Whoa, a second. Something's not right here.
Well, you know, it's like every father's dream, and it is, podcast listeners, it's every father's dream that you have a son and that your son becomes like some sort of professional athlete. It is. But, I mean, is this what's going to happen now in modern America and apparently modern New Zealand as well, which is, you know, the father has a son, the son's not really that athletic or semi-athletic, but never going to really make it. So it's like, I've got an idea. You're going to be a girl now, and we're going to have you compete in the girl sports, and that's how I'm going to be really proud.
Well, at this point, why have girls in male sports? Why not just have the sport?
Yeah, right. In which case, there wouldn't be girls in sports, right? Or if there would be, then they would be sitting on the bench.
Right, because you never see it go from a female playing into a male sport. I mean, there's one-off circumstances where you had some, you know, female athletes, kickers and stuff in college football, but you've never seen it to that level where female soccer players said, you know what, I'm going to go try out the men's team.
Right. So we might as well just get rid of Title IX and just go with Title, I don't know.
Title 3.
Title, I don't know. You can play whatever you want.
Title 10, I don't know. So get this, U.S. trans Olympic athlete, now we have another trans Olympic athlete in the United States, that says, my goal is to win the Olympics so I can burn a United States flag on the podium when I win. So a transgender Olympic, according to the Daily Wire, athlete that qualified as an alternate, so thankfully this transgender is an alternate, to represent the United States at this year's Summer Olympics, said that her goal was to win and then burn the American flag at the Olympic podium. BMX freestyle rider Chelsea Wolfe wrote in a Facebook post, unearthed by Fox News, my goal is to win the Olympics so I can burn the flag. And it just goes on and on and on. So here's someone who obviously really isn't interested in winning for the right reasons, which is interesting, right? Because it was a guy, it's a biological guy, realizes they can't win as a guy, so then identifies as a woman, goes into the Olympics, and then says, well, that's just not enough for me to really ruin sports for men and women. I also want to burn the flag. I want to prove a point because I'm really woke.
Sounds like a very troubled individual with a mental disease, to tell you the truth, that's very, very unhappy. And they want to promote that unhappiness on everybody else.
They do. They do. They want to promote the happiness. They're just not, they're angry, and who knows, you know, maybe Coca-Cola would pick her up if she actually won, right? It's like, yeah, see, we're Coke and we're really woke.
Let's think about that. How many other sponsorship could she possibly qualify for? You burning the American flag. I mean, that has Nike written all over it.
Yeah.
I mean, what are some of the brands that definitely wouldn't support, let's say, let's just say the transgender athlete won, like this guy who from New Zealand, who is a biological man, but competing as a woman as a weightlifter. And so, you know, would I don't know, Kotex support her or one of those places? Because,
I didn't know where you were going with that.
I mean, probably not. I mean, what are they going to say?
To the max, maxi pack. I don't know.
Kotex, even for weightlifters, you know. So next up, podcast listeners, Jeff Bezos is going to go into outer space on his own rocket ship that his own company has built Only when you are a billionaire, 100 times over, can you afford to have your own company that builds rocket ships that take you to space and then safely back to Earth. Well, good for Jeff Bezos, first of all. But here's the story. There is a petition, and the petition is out, and they're saying, please don't return from space, Jeff Bezos. I can't make this stuff up. There is a petition, and they don't want Jeff Bezos to return from Earth. That's how much they don't like him. So more than 70,000 people have signed this petition to stop Jeff Bezos from returning to Earth after his trip to space next month. The petition to stop him from coming back to Earth has 70,000 signatures, as I said, and Bezos plans to enter space next month, just July, by the way, July 20th. And he will be on the first human flight of Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket, which I guess is a rocket of his company's, which is New Shepard, I guess, is the name of the rocket or the name of the company. No, the name of the company is Blue Origin. Blue Origin, that's his company. So we have ABC News reporting on this particular rocket trip of, Rocket Man Jeff Bezos. And here's the clip.
To the big question, who will join Jeff Bezos on his flight to space? The Amazon CEO revealing he's going to space on his own rocket ship in July. He's taking his brother, and he says he'll take another passenger. That extra window seat is now up for auction. Here's Victor Akendo.
Even for one of the richest people in the world, the stakes are high.
You see the Earth from space, it changes you.
Jeff Bezos announcing on Instagram he's flying next month in a rocket made by his company, Blue Origin.
It's a thing I've wanted to do all my life. It's an adventure. It's a big deal for me.
Bezos will be on board the first human flight of the 59-foot New Shepard rocket near the edge of space, 60 miles above Earth. Total flight time, a mere 11 minutes. 3 of them spent in zero gravity. No spacesuit required.
So no space suit required. They're going to be, I guess, in orbit for 14 minutes or thereabouts. And then the rocket ship comes back to Earth and then lands safely, I guess.
So they're unprotected in this thing that looks like a giant penis. And my question is, when it comes back...
What looks like that? You mean the rocket ship?
The rocket ship.
The rocket ship. Well, let's take a picture. Well, actually, let's take a look at it. We're going to have our producer, Christopher Hopkins, put a picture of this up. So if you're listening, podcast listeners, you're not going to be able to see it. Well, you can imagine. But if you're watching YouTube, you will be able to see a picture of this particular rocket ship. It literally is the shape, it's got a phallic shape, right? Which you would expect because it's a rocket, but except that it actually is more human-like than ever.
It looks more like a tribute to Bill Clinton.
Well, Bill's one of the big advertisers on the side, and Jeff Bezos, of course, with the bald head, it's just perfect for him, right? Because most people think that he is what that rocket is, so...
I'm going to assume it's like other rockets that it starts to fall apart, and then upon entry, it's smaller than when it took off. So do we consider, is that shrinkage? Houston, we have shrinkage. I mean, that's what they're looking for, right?
So we have, this actually reminds me of Dr. Evil and Austin Powers. Remember when Dr. Evil had that rocket ship and he hops on the rocket ship, I think with Mr. Bigglesworth, his cat, and the cat like with no hair because it was cryogenically frozen or something like that. And so they get on this rocket ship and the rocket ship looks exactly like, Jeff Bezos' rocket ship. And Jeff Bezos is kind of like Dr. Evil because no one really likes the guy because he's kind of putting everybody out of business one at a time. So he is kind of the original Dr. Evil. But in this clip from the actual Austin Powers, Dr. Evil gets on the rocket ship that does look like, let's face it, a phallic symbol, and gets on it. And then the rest of the world is reporting like, oh my God, that looks like a, and of course, typical Austin Powers. We have that clip and here it is. That's him going into outer space, podcast listeners.
Colonel, you better take a look at this radar. What is it, son?
I don't know, sir. But it looks like a giant dick.
Yeah.
Take a look out of starboard.
Oh my God, it looks like a huge...
Pecker!
Oh, yeah.
Wait, that's not a woodpecker. It looks like someone's...
Private! We have reports of an unidentified flying object!
So, there's a because naturally you can't say certain things in movies unless you have an R rating. So
Well, that sounded like the Washington Post reporting on this.
Yeah, it would have been a lot more accurate if it were. But Jeff Bezos is going on this rocket that looks just like an Austin Powers rocket with Dr. Evil getting on it. This big, and it just, I think it's really funny that how many people don't like this guy because, look, for better or for worse, and we can all be honest about this, there are things about Bezos' company which are game-changing. I mean, he's done an amazing job with this company where it's real-time, on-demand stuff that you want. You just want it and you're going to get it like right away. Whatever stuff, you name it, it can be shipped through Amazon and delivered to you in some cases the next day, in some cases the same day. But he's also putting everybody out of business. And now he wants to put the other common carriers out of business. He wants to get into the actual plane and shipping business to put UPS and FedEx out of business. So this guy has made a lot of enemies and he employs a lot of people who are really low wage workers in dead end jobs. But at least they do have jobs. As a conservative, we're happy they do have jobs, but it's not a future that I think any of us really want to see in a widespread scale. What do you think?
The end game of monopoly is very concerning, and that's what we're all concerned about. But I agree with you. The way that company is run at times, it's remarkable. They really don't own anything. Amazon doesn't own the products. Amazon doesn't own any of the trucks on the road. It doesn't own it. It's basically... It's the Uber of the rest of the products out there is what it really is. It doesn't own any of it. My question on going back to the clip was, he's got to know what this space shuttle looks like, correct? I mean, it's not like, it looks like something, but I can't think of what exactly it is. But it's almost like he's giving it to the rest of the world. You know what? You guys think I'm a Peter or whatever she called it, a pecker.
Yes.
Guess what? I'm going to outer space in something that looks like a pecker. What do you think about that?
She was talking about a woodpecker on there, and she's like, I haven't seen a woodpecker like that, and it's like, But look, this is funny because for some reason in the rocket ship business, this seems to be a thing, right? But with Bezos, he really went over the top. I mean,
maybe he identifies as a female shuttle.
Yeah, because his brother's going to go on it with him. And
but not his ex-wife, right?
But not
no.
Yeah, well, you might want to send her on one, and that one doesn't coming back. And
she's trying to check in 24 hours before the flight.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have to have a COVID test?
Yeah, that's right.
Requires a COVID test.
You need a COVID passport once you break the Earth.
Passport,
once you break the Earth's crust, you gotta.
So if you want to sign the petition, you can go online. It says, "Please don't return from space, Jeff Bezos." You can sign that. 70,000 people have signed this. Probably mostly Amazon employees. I wouldn't be surprised. It's how much he's supposed to step down from the company too. In like 2 months. My understanding is he steps down. Either he's stepping down before space or after he comes back. I'm not really sure, but it's very soon.
Can you run the company from outer space?
I mean, I would assume so. I don't know what the broadband connection is like up there, but we receive reports all the time on like Fox News where they're talking about UFO sightings, and I've always thought those were probably Amazon drones.
Can you imagine what some of the some of the Martians might think of us if Bezos is like the first guy they come across and he's coming out there in his big penis-shaped shuttle, and they meet this guy, and they're like, "We don't want to go there." Well, maybe they'll stop showing up on Earth then.
Well, he does look like he's from the future with that nice haircut that he has. And,
it's really strange. Because I remember
steroid arms.
He was on Oprah years ago, and like he just looked very different. Then he looked like a normal guy, hair and all that stuff. It's not his fault, I guess, that he's losing his hair, but he looked like a normal guy years ago on Oprah, and he was just talking about this vision he had.
Now he looks like a Bond supervillain. Yeah. And now he created himself a spaceship to go along with it.
Literally Dr. Evil. It's so true. I mean, he looks just like him. His whole life is just formed around Dr. Evil. The only thing would be funnier.
$1 million.
You know what?
I know if he's got a hairless cat.
So guys, let's do this pact, okay?
Can you buy that on Amazon? Mr. Bigelow's?
So Chris, so you're getting what I'm putting down here. So get this. We're gonna have our producer, podcast listeners, Christopher Hopkins. We're going to Mark and the Millennials start a petition today. A petition to allow Mr. Bigglesworth to go with Jeff Bezos into outer space. Let's start that petition. Would you do it? Would you set that up and change.org or whatever the thing is we can do? Would you do that? But it's got to be for Mark and the Millennials because we want to be able to produce this and push out the podcast.
What about Mini-Me? Can Mini-Me go as well?
Oh my God. So get this, podcast listeners. Power companies in Texas are remotely adjusting your thermostat. The power companies are changing your thermostat and turning it down or turning it up, depending on the time of year and the issue, in the state of Texas because of greenouts. Now, a brownout used to be an explanation of, let's say, a power company had a power station, and the power station, for whatever reason, went off service unexpectedly. There wasn't enough power generated to put on the grid, so there was a brownout. But a greenout is an intentional brownout, because a greenout is basically saying we're shutting down those power stations, the generators, I should say, that operate on coal and natural gas and oil and nuclear. We're going to shut all those down one by one, and we're going to make you buy green energy from solar and wind. The problem is it's an intermittent, which means it only works when it's windy or only works when it's sunny. So there are serious problems in Texas with this. And what's really fascinating about this is in Houston, this couple didn't realize that they had actually signed up for this service. And here's the problem. The fact that a power company could even do this means that, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. First, we have ABC. It's actually KHOU 11 Houston. I'm not sure if this is an ABC news station or not, but it's KHOU 11 Houston reporting on this particular story where a couple had their thermostat remotely changed without consent. At least that's what they said. Here it is.
The main way ERCOT is asking everyone to conserve power is by turning up the temperature on their thermostats. But what if someone else is doing it for you without your knowledge? Matt Doherty is hearing from folks in Deer Park who say it's happening to them.
When Brandon English got home from work yesterday, the house was hot.
She had cranked it down at about 2:30. It takes a long time for this house to get cool once it gets that hot.
Earlier in the day, Brandon's wife and their daughters decided to take their afternoon nap.
They had been asleep long enough that the house had already got to 78 degrees. So they wake up sweating.
Without anyone touching it, their thermostat was changed while they were sleeping, making their home unbearably hot.
Was my daughter at the point of overheating? You know, she's 3 months old. They dehydrate very quickly. You know, we're very careful when we go out places, let alone her covered up in the bed, just getting hot.
Soon after that, his wife got an alert on her phone. The thermostat had been changed remotely, raising the temperature during a 3-hour energy-saving event. The Family Smart thermostat was installed a few years ago as part of a new home security package.
Security.
Many smart thermostats can be enrolled in a program called Smart Savers Texas. It's operated by a company called Energy Hub. The agreement states that in exchange for entry into a sweepstakes, electric customers allow for the company to access their thermostats during periods of high energy demand. Their list of its clients include TXU Energy, CenterPoint, and ERCOT. Brandon says he unenrolled their thermostat as soon as he found out.
Because you never would have done it.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't want anybody else controlling my things for me.
A scroll through a Houston Reddit board shows Brandon's not alone. Several others say they found out during this week's heat wave that their thermostats were being accessed remotely as well. Brandon says although it's been convenient, it's just not worth it.
If somebody else can manipulate this, I'm not for it.
So that is KHOU 11 News in Houston reporting about the fact that smart thermostats were installed, probably with smart meters as well. And then those smart thermostats were adjusted remotely by the power company because the power company said, well, you opted in or didn't opt out, depending on the language of the agreement. When we put this stuff into your house, the smart meters and the smart thermostats, you gave us the permission to change the temperature depending on, guys, look, when it's hot outside, you want the air conditioner on. So the power company, this is Democrat logic, right? The power company is saying, and the Democrats are saying that when it's hot outside, we're going to be able to make it really hot inside. And when it's cold outside, we're going to make it really cold inside.
Well, they want to control every aspect of your life to start with. So why not the temperature in your house?
In a nutshell, that's exactly it. You're
That's
not
exactly
smart enough
it.
to run your own life. We're going to run it for you. We're going to tell you how hot or how cold. The scary thing to me is if you think about what we just went through for the last year and a half with COVID and them restricting everything they did from when you can go out, where you can wear a mask, where you can sit down, what businesses can be open. Now all of a sudden they're going to say, well, we think the optimal temperature is 80 degrees. And in Texas, as you guys know, it can get dangerously hot. I mean, you have more people dying from heat stroke in Texas than you probably do from COVID. But if you let them turn your air conditioning down, now
I tell you what, the left, I mean, this is an opportunity, really, as technology advances. I just feel that...
To control people's lives, right?
Well, it's to control people's lives, and you see that with big tech and social media. I mean, they're out to control people's lives. And we know that the opposite of that and what people want is freedom. And I'm telling you, if Elon Musk had a battery technology and some type of aesthetically pleasing solar single, and you were allowed by law, which we're not allowed in our state, to disconnect from the grid, I'd be one of the first people to make the investment. I mean, it's not like conservatives or Republicans hate alternative energy.
It's just that it doesn't work yet.
Right,
That's the problem.
Right, it doesn't work and needs to be subsidized.
It's not reliable.
But right, at some point in the future, the technology is going to evolve. And if you want it to evolve faster,
free market,
allow people to disconnect from the grid, allow them to set their own thermostat. And I think you see that things take off.
But it's a great point, Matt. But here's what I find interesting too is Texas is a Republican state, and the business people in Texas decided to push these renewables because there is a lot of money to be made with them because of all of the tax incentives that were provided to them at the federal level. And so it was the Republicans in Texas that did this.
Republicans behaving like Democrats? I'm just shocked.
Exactly. And in California, obviously, it's the Democrats. In California, it's the Democrats. And in both states, they're creating this sense of emergency. And the sense of emergency is, oh my gosh, we don't have enough power. The world's falling apart. It's because of climate change. It's like, guys, we don't have enough power because of climate change. We don't have enough power because you're messing up the power grid and you're putting renewables on that aren't reliable. I mean, Brian, we're seeing this in our own state.
We're the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, and we have a huge deposit of natural gas below the state of Maryland, which we let Pennsylvania go down under, take it, and then leave because somebody, what was her name, Brockovich, made some movie saying that it's going to kill all the birds, the fish.
Aaron Brockovich, that was a great movie.
And we're all going to die. And it's all based on junk. It's junk messaging. And so they scare enough of the American public, like, we're all going to die one day. Well, without nuclear energy, solar and wind have no chance whatsoever. But they scared so many people so long ago about nuclear, but yet Europe does it, not a conservative bastion. But Europe knows how to use nuclear correctly.
They abandon nuclear energy because they're anti-science. They're anti-technology.
True.
And the left does this all the time. They'll create this and they'll manufacture a crisis. And it's normally something like a wide, big topic issue like systemic racism or climate change. And they'll manufacture the crisis. And then there's really never any solutions out there except for, turning more power over to them. And that's what they ultimately want.
It's always the solution.
More power for themselves.
But here's what's interesting about this argument too, Matt, is that, and you kind of said this before, you touched upon it, and that is that because of technology and the advancement of technology, it's allowing, with the wrong people in charge of government, it's allowing government and utilities and others to reach inside of your house and do things that heretofore were unthinkable and an invasion of your privacy, namely adjusting your thermostat. Now, look, if you want a smart thermostat and you want to adjust your thermostat via your iPhone or your Google device, whatever it may be, good. But the idea that we would cede that to a third party, that's the one place that's home. That's yours. And Democrats are making this happen in California, and Republicans are making it happen in Texas.
So they use fear to have us yield over all of our privacy, all our own personal decision-making over to them because they're smarter than you and I.
Well, you're yielding over your freedom.
Right.
And for the Republicans, it's just so disappointing to constantly hear these stories about the Republican Party because, I mean, they're supposed to be the party that champions freedom. They're supposed to be the party that defends the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. And most of them are accomplices in this problem, and it's disheartening.
What happened to the original liberals? That's what liberalism was: making your own decision, being against government,
being super free.
Yeah, being super free,
using science and questioning things and trying new things and seeing if they actually work, and if they don't, try something that works.
They've been intimidated into silence.
Yeah, it's a mindless. Yeah, now they're just a mindless mob that follows along to whatever they're telling them you're supposed to do.
So, case in point, in the Wall Street Journal opinion section, from the editorial board, okay, the entire editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, it says the following: the California and Texas greenouts renewables show again that they aren't reliable to power the grid. And it's going to read a little bit of this. It says electric grid operators in Texas and California are again urging residents to conserve power amid a sweltering heat wave to avoid blackouts. Keeping your thermostats at 78 degrees during the summer may be the green new normal. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas warned this week that a large number of unexpected power plant outages combined with surging demand is straining the grid. Meantime, California's independent system operator forecasts that electricity demand might exceed supply for several days this week. For residents in both states, this must feel like deja vu. Last August, Californians experienced rolling blackouts amid a heat wave that engulfed the Southwest. California generates half of its electricity from solar during summer afternoons. Let me say that again, podcast listeners. California generates half of its electricity from solar during summer afternoons, but it didn't have enough power in the evenings when the sun faded. Okay, so I got to stop there, right? We're in the 21st century, and we know that we are advancing very quickly in science and technology. But for some reason, Democrats haven't been able to figure out that with solar panels, when you're relying on them almost exclusively in the state of California or wind turbines in Texas, that when the sun goes down, there might not be enough energy on the grid to power your house, Matt.
Well, they're science deniers. We've talked about this. I mean, they believe that you can touch the sun, maybe even visit into it, if you go at night. I mean, this is, look, California, why would anyone copy any policy ever made in California at this point? The state has had so many things going through it through the last 100 years, and the left has just squandered that and driven that state into the ground. And this is just one more example of it through an insane energy policy.
Maybe we should change that petition to have Bezos go to the sun first. Let's see if he can go to the sun, figure out how we can get that thing to shine on us 24 hours a day so California can get enough
Look,
energy.
if he leaves during winter solstice, I think he has a shot.
Right.
Well, certainly his head would reflect the sun,
right.
You know?
That would cause some climate change there, I think.
Yeah, that might not be good. And so, by the way,
what's the environmental impact of this rocket taking off?
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
First place?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Shouldn't this be solar power?
It should be solar. If
there is a huge footprint there, a huge climate footprint there, I'm sure.
I'll make a promise to you right now. If he can launch that shuttle strictly on solar panels, I'll put him on my house.
Well, Matt, and by the way, Matt, podcast listeners, Matt Morgan touched on this earlier, and that is namely, and I've said this many times here, and it always shocks, by the way, Democrats when you say this as a Republican, and namely, that is that if there's a way that there's a device, whatever that device is, call it solar, call it like a little mini wind turbine I could put next to my house, or something that would power my house, and I could cut the cords of the grid to my house and just say, electric company, bye-bye. I'm not paying you monthly anymore because I create all of my own power on site. That is uniquely Republican. It's uniquely conservative
absolutely.
Because we are very independent people and we don't like to be dependent on the power grid, especially now that we see the way Democrats are messing it up. The problem is that technology isn't ready for prime time. because of the fact that it's intermittent power works,
Well,
only
it's also
sometimes.
not ready for prime time because, I mean, as you're seeing, Democrats keep screwing it up.
Because they want to be in charge instead of letting the free market go after it. You guys, we all have kids about the same age, and we all remember when they broke up all of the telephone companies.
Baby bells.
That's exactly right. And what happened? All of a sudden, I didn't have to pay $20 or do a collect call. You millennials don't know what that is. When you used to call your parents and then
Brian,
you'd have to beg them to say yes. But what happened was the free market then took over. And we had all these companies pop up. And then that's when cell phones started to pop up. And now you can call anywhere in the world basically for free.
For free.
And you don't need to be beholden to these telephones and baby bells.
We just dealt with this in our General Assembly and our real jobs here. The state of Maryland is forcing contractors to put
Wait a minute, the General Assembly job is not a real job. I'm just saying.
I wasn't going to say that.
I've got a real job. That's not my real job.
Well, the part-time job.
That's right.
But the General Assembly...
it's the fake job. That's what that is.
It pays part-time. But it's full-time work.
It's a full-time job that you don't get paid for.
There's definitely that. But there's a policy out from the, was it the Electrical Commission or whatever, dealing with utility companies, that we had to put multiple strands of conduit down in these neighborhoods, and then I asked for the reason why, and they're like, "Well, you might need a replacement." I'm like, "And how long is that? 30 years, 40 years? I would think that we'd be disconnecting from the grid. I don't want to have a replacement conduit." So again, you have these insane policies that are playing for this gloom and doom, but ultimately they won't let you disconnect. I mean,
they will not let you disconnect, is correct. And Brian brought up like the free market, let the free market work with power generation, right? And I completely agree with that. And one of the problems is with solar and wind is because we're subsidizing it so much, there's no incentive for the companies that make solar panels or wind turbines to innovate, because they know they're going to be able to sell their stuff no matter what, because there's no innovation required, because you just sell it the way it is. And I know in our state, one of the ways that you get solar to work at its peak is not just obviously have sun shining on it, but you have to make sure that the solar panels are clean. So you have to wash them with fresh water constantly, because obviously when it rains, rain brings pollen and so forth on the panels and covers them with film. And so here's my point, podcast listeners. This just isn't ready, right? It doesn't make sense. The amount of natural resources you have to use to make them and then keep them working right, it's just through the roof.
Isn't it interesting how you have these big solar farms around on the East Coast and none of them have stormwater management?
Yeah, they don't have stormwater management. It's very true.
But if you look at the free market, I mean, just look at TVs and people can look at it now. The first big screens that came out weighed like 3,000 pounds. There were $15,000 to $18,000. In a matter of years, because the free market, all competing, now all of a sudden you can walk in, grab a 65-inch TV for $500 and carry it out in one arm.
And get this. What's interesting is one of the things that they were trying to do in this state, which I think is pretty fascinating, and there was this delegate, he's not in anymore, but podcast listeners, this is being tried in most blue states across the country, but it hasn't quite passed, but I think it will at some point, and I think it's a terrible idea. Namely, to require the utility company to put your footprint, your climate footprint on your utility bill. So for example, if you have a high utility bill because you like to keep your house really cool in the summer, by the way, my wife would be one of those, and really warm in the winter, that would be my wife also, then you would have a really high climate footprint. And the whole idea is that first you measure it, and then after you measure it, then you tax it. So you're already being taxed on your bill, of course, your electricity bill, especially in the blue states, more than any other state. But they want to measure the amount of your footprint, your carbon footprint, based on how much electricity you use. And then once they measure it, it's like, guess what? This guy, Brian Chisholm, he's got a really high carbon footprint. And then they're going to start publishing it and putting it out there on the web. And then it'll be like, you're the really bad guy because you got a really high carbon footprint. But you know what's funny? You know who has the high carbon footprints? The rich, wealthy leftists.
Like Senator Whitehouse?
Whitehouse, right? Sheldon Whitehouse, right? You know, who probably has a mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, probably.
But what do you think? It takes a lot of electricity to keep all those minorities out.
Be prepared. Yeah.
Somebody's got to run the gate up front.
Yeah, he can't have anyone at his beach club. It's an all-Whitehouse beach club. Sheldon Whitehouse.
But you say this, and here's the scary thing, because you guys both have different utility companies that I do. BG&E sends us in their service members. I am one of them. They send us a letter every month. Here's you. Here's your efficient neighbors. Here's the average neighbor. And it's basically shaming me. First of all, I don't know who these neighbors are that are efficient. They're living by candlelight, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
And making their food out back on a fire.
They're cooking on their the gas grill outside and using another kind of.
And they're pretty charged, but obviously they know how much I'm using. I'm always in the middle, which is still amazing to me. My wife does not turn the air on during the summer. I feel like I'm in the middle of
that would be awful.
Yeah.
Because it gets hot here.
A Time to Kill.
Hot
If you remember A Time to Kill, Matthew McConaughey's walking around the whole time sweating. That's how I am in my house. But still, I get this nice color code that tells me I'm in the middle. It's like, I'm in the middle here. I'm like, what is going on? The only time it's below 70 in my house is in January when the wife refuses to turn the heat on. But it's measuring me and telling me your neighbors are better than you. You're not efficient enough. So they're only one step away from then producing that out to the public and saying, well, you owe us more because you're
that's interesting. I didn't know they did
quicker.
that.
Yes.
So here's my question.
Copies.
So here's my question, because we started out this segment talking about how the electric company in Houston is remotely altering your thermostat without your knowledge. And of course, not letting you use power and making your house cool in the summer as much as you want it to, or as warm as you want in the winter, the times when you want it the most. And what if they start measuring your carbon footprint and then saying to you, guess what? You're up at the upper limits of your carbon footprint, of the allowable carbon footprint. So therefore, we're going to remotely turn down your thermostat. This is what I think they're up to. This is what I think the left is going to be doing.
They love this. The left loves this. It's a matter of equity to them. You can't have somebody like Brian Chisholm using up all the damn power in the neighborhood.
Well, right, because
I asked them to come live in my house for a couple of days. They'll leave.
Well, that'll be the next thing. It'll be people of color are using less of a footprint than you are, and therefore you're not entitled to have a house as cool as you want it to have in the summer or as warm as you want it to have in the winter. This is the danger of all of this stuff, because it's always about...
This is the danger of when you implement bureaucrats to make these decisions and give them the authority to make these decisions.
Exactly.
Now, a utility company, most people assume that, I'm going to use a certain amount of kilowatts and be charged accordingly. That's the free market. And as the price goes up, I'm going to use less because I don't want to pay more.
That's exactly right.
Right. That's how everyone assumes. But no, this is about equity. This is them controlling your life.
Yeah, and they're willing to put the utility in charge because the utility is by definition a monopoly in your particular area. And if you can get the utility to do it through legislation, then they've got complete and utter control of your life.
But there's no way you can push back against it. It's a monopoly. You can't change utility companies.
No, you can only unelect the people that put those laws into place. That you can do.
Oh, I mean, try to get a person off a utility board. Has that ever happened in America?
I know they're all for the most part bought and paid for. So final thoughts on this, gents. Go ahead, Brian. Come on, bring it on.
I mean, if you just summarize the whole podcast today, it's about them controlling you, not them being controlled by anybody, not them being controlled by the free market. It's about them controlling how you live, your privacy. Not all of that is out the door now. Yep. Once they get their nose under the camel's nose under the tent,
they're never getting it back.
It's never getting it back.
Never. Once Jeff Bezos gets his rocket ship under your tent, I know it's all over.
I'm looking for the weather, the weather report from the sun from him next. The penis is about ready to blow. It's hot as it can get here. I can tell you that.
Matt, your final thoughts. I'm not sure you can top this one.
No, I can't top that one. I mean, when it's hot,
the cat will lose all its hair, and
the cat will lose his hair. And when it's hot outside, you would like to be cool, and you would like to have at least, as we go further with technology, it seems like we have less and less control of our own lives and our own destiny. And that's really one of the problems that we're facing in this country is people need to get back to individual liberty and be self-accountable.
Yes, and use technology for the benefit of your family and yourself, of being independent and basically disconnecting yourself from that all connecting grid that is trying to collect your data and learn more about you and then try to control every aspect of your life. Unless you're, of course, Jeff Bezos, and then you get to do whatever you want, including build your own rocket ship.
Or Senator Whitehouse gets to do whatever he wants.
Oh, yeah, because he gets an all-white beach club, but meanwhile, everybody else is a racist. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah,
Just unbelievable.
It's amazing.
Well, that's it for Mark the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. A special thank you to Christopher Hopkins, our producer, and thank you to our guests, Delegate Brian Chisholm and Delegate Matt Morgan. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.